Thank you so much, ladies. Our next conversation continues on the topic of human rights and equity, and this will focus on the importance of representation in public and online spaces toward building a more cohesive society. So please welcome to the stage Kimahli Powell. She is CEO of the Rainbow Railroad, Dedo N Baranshamaje, Director of Innovation of the Siegel Family Foundation, Alise Marshall, Senior Global Lead of Public Affairs at Pinterest, and this will be moderated by Baranshamaje of the Greenwich Media Strategies.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you for that kind introduction. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being with us and for being with us on the third day. This is going to be such a great conversation. I'm so excited for this discussion. To follow up on introductions, I'm Baranshamaje. I'm the host and creator of Oh My World on YouTube, where we explain geopolitical events in a fun, easy, and satirical way, which means you can often find me in a wig and bad accent impersonating most world leaders. I'm especially excited for this conversation because we're going to be talking about promoting inclusivity online. So just to introduce my panel, I have Dedo Baranshamaje, who's the Director of Strategy for the Siegel Family Foundation, which works to advance positive change in Africa. I have Alise Marshall, who's the Senior Global Lead for Public Affairs at Pinterest. And I have Kimahli Powell, who's the CEO of Rainbow Railroad, which helps at-risk LGBTQI plus individuals reach safety. And so we're going to talk about the policies and content online that can promote inclusivity. Dedo, I'm going to start with you since you're right next to me. Can you talk to us about the challenges that you have faced in your efforts when you are raising funds and pursuing philanthropic efforts in Africa? What are the challenges you face in this space? And generally, what do you think needs to be fixed?
Such a big question.
Huge question.
Good morning, everyone. I'm so happy to be here and to be surrounded by people who are working every day to expand on what inclusivity means. Inclusivity is not only fundamental, but crucial for a safe and prosperous society. And I'm really glad that we are here talking about it. So one of the challenges around that is particularly around when you look at the room even here, right? There are so few people that look like me and him and her. And throughout the last 3 days, I was very, very surprised by the lack of a full spectrum of experiences, cultural, ethnicity, gender. Well, gender is not one of them. But I think one of them is representation. Do we see often leaders and visionaries that are from what long ago has been considered as minorities, being at the forefront of leading change in their communities, but also having global stages like this. One of them is Concordia, that has done a tremendous work in making sure that panels like this are inclusive of everyone. Kudos for Concordia. And the second, I think, is trust, because trust is built by contact and is built by access. So if we continue to have spaces that are not accessible by everyone, it takes us more time to build the trust that is required to start seeing funding moving, not moving the needle, but really, really moonshots, where we start to see funding flowing through in entrepreneurs and communities of color that are really, really diverse. I would say two things. One is representation, and second is building trust. And the third, and then I'm going to stop, is around decision-making and leadership. How do you expand spaces that start including folks who have not historically been on decision-making tables, on panels? And that's really, really critical, because you need the voices of the folks who have experiences of the things that they're working on to expand on our own understanding and to build not only trust, but also bring the expertise required to have a society that is representative of everyone.
Yeah, this is like music to my ears. I worked in national security in the government as a woman of Middle Eastern descent. And so I can completely appreciate what you're saying. Hopefully the times are shifting.
Yes.
There's more demand, which gets me, Alise, to the work that you've all been doing at Pinterest. You just launched an AI generated or supported campaign towards body positivity and body inclusivity. And you engaged your community as well in doing that. So can you tell us a little bit about that, your process, and how it's going?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think one sobering stat that we've been sort of wrestling with is the recent CDC Youth Risk Behavior Survey data, which showed that young people, particularly young girls, are dealing with a urgent youth mental health crisis. 1 in 6 students in the United States of America has an active suicide plan. And that's not coming from me. You can check the stats, the figures with the CDC and the US Surgeon General. And we've been called in as social media platforms to reckon with what are we doing that is contributing to the youth mental health crisis, but also how can we be a part of the solution? With so many young people being inextricably linked to their phones and to social media platforms, Pinterest has been trying to identify what are ways that we can be a part of the solution and create more nourishing and positive experiences online. One of the ways that we do that is through our work on inclusive product, which you alluded to. I was just in New York last week with our inclusive product team, and we've been working with experts and some of our users, bringing them into the process to give us feedback. What can we do better? What can we do to increase representation and make people feel more seen and valued and included and a part of a community on our platform? We reach 460 million users every month across the globe, many of whom identify as women and girls, and we don't take that responsibility lightly. So when they give us feedback that they do not feel seen and included, and I love Pinterest, I feel so safe on Pinterest, but I just don't see myself, we take that seriously. So we got feedback a few years ago around, sometimes I have to type in qualifiers if I'm looking for a certain makeup to match my skin tone. So we launched an effort, we launched our efforts around inclusive product, focusing specifically on diverse skin tone ranges. Then we moved into diverse hair pattern because so many people come to Pinterest to get hairstyle inspiration. And when you have to type in qualifiers, oh, well, I'm looking for hairstyles that, for protective styles or for coarser hair types or, that kind of thing, that is creating a barrier to access inspiration that you shouldn't have to face. And so most recently, we worked with an organization by the name of the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance, NAFA. Lived experience of what it feels like to walk into a room, walk into a retail store, and not see themselves reflected, look at advertisements and just, a part of the cultural zeitgeist and not fit into this standard prototype of what is considered beautiful or who should be seen and made visible in a society. And we worked with them for about 9 months to inform our technology, which actually is AI powered. And what it does is it pulls from all of our corpus of content, which billions of pins that we have access to in our corpus. And what it does is says, we're going to make this more diverse and more representative from the very beginning by default, so that you don't have to type in a qualifier, you don't have to put in a search range or anything like that, but just being on the platform, seeing a more diverse range of body types and sizes, and what that means for a young person who, has been bullied or has been ostracized or has dealt with feelings of sadness and hopelessness, which we've seen 3 in 5 in that same CDC report that I referred to. 3 in 5 young girls, teen girls in 2021 reported feeling sad or hopeless. That is the largest increase over a decade in the United States. And so we have a responsibility to fix that. And so asking ourselves, who is actually being reflected when they come on our platform, who's able to build community and feel represented, that is critical to that. And that would not have been possible without including our partners at NAFA.
Interesting, wow. What a great effort. I hope that other platforms are pursuing similar efforts. I feel like there's a greater sense of awareness, and I hope that there are similar efforts to implement policies of that kind. Kimahli, I want to shift. Your world is a bit different, and before we dive in to the promoting inclusivity online, I wanted to see if you could paint a picture for us of, you've been working with Rainbow Railroad, helped found it since 2016. And there are parts of the world where support for LGBTQI plus rights is growing and things are getting better. And there are areas of the world where it's getting scarier and much worse. Uganda this year passed the most anti-LGBTQI plus law that exists in the world, punishable by death, I believe. And even my own family's country, Lebanon, which used to be a sort of safe haven for LGBTQI plus A individuals coming from Iraq and Syria during ISIS, for example. Many of them went to Lebanon. And now in the last year, Lebanon has gone completely backwards on this issue in particular, and those individuals are now very much at risk. So set the scene for us. So how do you see things are going? Is it getting easier in some ways, harder in others? Both at the same time. Can you paint the picture for us?
Absolutely. Thanks for the question. So, on one hand, LGBTQI plus people are more visible than ever before, right? Watch your favorite Netflix show, and you'll see representation. You can now watch, good movies that have representation. And I watched a LGBTQ film on Prime TV that was terrible. And so there's progress around our representation around the globe. And I think because high-income countries like the United States and others have advanced marriage equality, there's an overall sense that we are towards representation. I remember when Laverne Cox was on the cover of Time magazine, I think back in 2016 or so. I think we thought that this is it. We are advancing progress. And yet that's not the case internationally. And I think another turning point was when India decriminalized same-sex intimacy in 2018. Before then, 2/3 of the world's population were actually in countries that criminalized same-sex intimacy. So what does that mean? Rainbow Railroad works on two different touch points. One, there are still 68 countries that criminalize same-sex intimacy, and there are 110 million people displaced around the world, which is the highest number on record. And having just come from Uganda, I was there last month, what we do is when people are at risk, we step in and help either provide safety in country or evacuate them. And we've helped evacuate over 2,000 people since I've been leading the organization. But no one wants to leave their country. People want to be able to stay in their country and live and survive and thrive. And the challenge, especially when we talk to representation online, is that while there is progress, and to quote Martin Luther King, the moral arc of history will bend towards justice. At the same time, there are forces, well-funded, well-coordinated forces, building campaigns in multiple countries to advance hate. And you are seeing that in countries around the world. So one of the things that's remarkable about Uganda is that Uganda already criminalized same-sex intimacy before they advanced this law. And many forces that are funded right here in the United States, adopt a playbook to advance hate in other countries. It's coordinated online, it's coordinated through social media, and there's no coincidence that this law is happening in Uganda, where there's a similar law in neighboring Kenya, where people are fleeing, in Ghana, which people would never have suspected would be advancing anti-LGBTQI sentiment. And it's the same playbook that is advancing now nearly 400 anti-trans laws right here in the United States. So I think one of the things that's most remarkable about this effort, while there's progress, is that there's a well-fueled, well-funded, coordinated effort to advance hate. And they're using online as a tool towards hate. And the one last thing I'll say about online tools is the one thing that's most concerning. When I went to Uganda, of course the death penalty is terrible. It's wild to think about that you could be punished by death for repeat crimes. But what was most striking was this displacement. So if you're in a slum in Uganda and you're outed because of this law, and the forced evictions is one of the biggest features, you have nowhere to go. And your pictures are now on social media. That's a big part of the tool. And so you have no other choice but to flee somewhere else in the country, but you're already exposed. And so we are trying to use as many tools as possible to use online tools to protect people at risk.
Yeah, can I pick up on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so one of the things, again, coming back to listening to our users, the Trevor Project released a report earlier this summer that showed that and you've probably seen this also in your work, that for LGBTQ youth of color in particular, being associated with at least one online space was associated with reduced levels of anxiety and reduced suicide rate.
Amazing.
Just being connected to. So the conversation that we're having right now around ban social media, get rid of it, that evidence is actually quite mixed for some communities that find community, that see themselves reflected online in ways that maybe in the physical environment or in their community, they are not welcome. They do not see themselves. And in fact, they're met with violence. On the same token though, what that report showed was that LGBTQ youth of color were also experiencing great, higher levels of racism and online harassment, which is why it's important that we bring in groups like the Black Justice Coalition, which is a Black-led LGBTQ organization that's on our Pinterest Inclusion Advisory Council that we bring in to advise us on our content policies, and to ensure that we're actually keeping proximity to communities with lived experience so that we can make sure that the work we're doing, because even the best intended work can have bad outcomes when you don't listen to people with lived experience, which is why it's so important that we bring them into the fold to design and deploy this technology with us.
Yeah. I want to harp quick into the technology briefly. Dedo, though, can I ask you about your investment in Africa, about the Skull Family Foundation's investment in Africa, if you can highlight a cool anecdote or story or example of what comes with investment like that.
Oh, I have a ton.
Your
Picking
favorite.
one is going to be hard. 10 years ago when I joined the foundation, I was the first African that was hired by the organization. So an organization that had over 80% of the portfolio white, American, and from the global north, over time, in less than 6 years, became an organization that has a full team in Africa that makes grant-making decisions and that builds relationships beyond our own work with the places where we work at 100%. And then that also resulting in building a portfolio today of a little over 350 organizations that we fund currently, and 89% of those being Africans from the places where they work. So the idea of inclusion is not a kumbaya. There is a really serious outcome on society when we talk about expanding the spaces to include people who have different types of experiences. They expand knowledge and the data that we have that makes doing business easy. And what else do I have as an anecdote? We're starting to see a little bit more and more. Well, another one is not actually good, but it's a funny one. When we go on site visits, most organizations are expecting to see probably a white man. And my name is hard to pronounce, so I always make it a short and say Dedo N. It could be anything. And when we get on a site, people are still talking and planning around what they're going to do, what they're going to show the guest. And I'm like, oh, hi, I'm here to meet. And they're like, oh, please, we're busy, but we're going to attend to you. And then they spend time planning until the moment then they realize that the person that they're receiving is someone that looks like them. The shock in their face is something that I live with every day, to realize that there has been serious challenges and damages to this idea of inclusion, that people do not see themselves and people that look like them as people who are supposed to be serving them.
Makes a big difference. And we'll end quickly because we have our time's wrapping up, on how technology, if you can answer in 20 seconds each, how technology has helped, and is technology the only answer? Alise and then Kimahli.
Okay. Well, one important point that I think you raised, that I think is a common misconception, is that efforts around diversity, equity, and inclusion are just good for humanity and just good for societal impact, but they actually drive business impact. under the Pinterest Foundation, we're always looking at shared value. What are the ways that we can drive impact for business, for our core business, because we are a for-profit entity, while also driving humanity forward. And we're seeing real outcomes from the work that we're doing around inclusive AI. One stat that I just learned about was that when we expanded our skin tone range filter on Pinterest earlier this year to other countries, we saw a 70% increase in saves.
Wow.
That is that's actually meaningful. That is a material shift that matters to business, which shows that when you improve inclusivity and representation and diversity, both online and in the physical realm, it has real business and economic value, as well as pushing society and humanity forward towards a more positive future.
Amazing.
We have to use online. It's an imperative. So the positive thing is, in the wake of this hate, Rainbow Rare receives 10,000 requests a year. And our ultimate goal and objective is to partner with governments. We launched a landmark partnership with the Canadian government. And so looking at online spaces, people find us. Our website is available in multiple languages. People tweet at us, X at us, tweet at us through multiple platforms. And so I think what we're doing, because people are so coordinated for hate, we just have to be as coordinated for good.
Yes. Wonderful. Great way to end. Thank you. Thank you to our esteemed panel. This has been such a great conversation. We could have continued. And thank you all for attending.
Thank you.
Thank you.